Hey guys, my name is Haley and today I'm going to be filming a books I've read recently. There's a lot of them, but no worries. I haven't been reading that much as in like the last 2 weeks or so because I've fallen into a K-pop obsession, specifically Astro. Also, I apologize if my voice goes in and out. I just got over the worst sinus infection of my life. But we're gonna just get right on into the books that I read recently. Or by recently, I mean the books that I read during the month of October and then stopped reading altogether when I became obsessed with Astro. So the first one is Do Hard Things by Alex and Brett Harris. I believe they're twins. This is a Christian nonfiction book. This is about teenagers nowadays and how they're looked down upon in society and how people don't expect a lot from teenagers nowadays. Like, they're expected to do the bare minimum, if even that. I give this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think it is very motivating, and not just for teenagers. I think it's very motivating for really anyone because it gives you the right mindset to go into how you live your life and your career and your goals and that type of thing. But this was very, very good. It's one of those things I really want to make teenagers read, and I wish I would have read when I was that age. Next up, I read Welcome to Night Vale by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Cranor. If you don't know, I love the Welcome to Night Vale podcast, but I have not listened to it in many years. But there was a time period a couple years ago, not even a couple years ago, like when it started, I was really obsessed with it for like 50 episodes, and I would listen to it all the time every time they came out, and then I just fell off the bandwagon somehow. But I love this. I listened to the audiobook. That is the only way to listen to Night Vale because it's just perfect. I think it's so weird and crazy and like just the right kind of sci-fi for me. I like weird sci-fi, and this is just bizarre. That's all I can say to describe Night Vale. But I gave this 4.25 stars. I don't like it as much as the podcast itself, but I loved the feeling that this gave me and reminded me how much I do love that podcast. It's so funny and so weird and just so off the wall strange. Next up, I read The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I did not like this. I gave it 2 stars. I didn't like the way religion was handled, and I don't like that there's a church on the cover. It is a play, so I read it in like an hour. But yeah, there was literally, I don't even know why I gave it 2 stars because there's not really anything that I liked about it. It's just not a subject I like reading about. I don't like the way Christianity was portrayed, which is one of my biggest pet peeves if you didn't know. So yeah, really a 1.5 stars because I think it would be fun to watch live maybe, but I would also be annoyed with the same things. And next up, I listened to the audiobook of World War Z, which I gave this 4 stars. This is not your typical zombie novel, but I really liked it. It's basically people giving their accounts after the fact of the zombie war and like after the fact of the apocalypse and what they did and how they survived. Like, there's a little bit of action, but not a ton. And it's a very different take on the zombie genre, so I was a really big fan. It's not my favorite by any means, but it's definitely not some of the really crap zombie novels that I've read in the past. Wow, that voice crack. And next up, I read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. I've already put up my review for this because I filmed it not too long after I met Hank and John at their event. I started annotating, but I haven't gotten that far yet because I have not been reading, as I said earlier. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I love April May. I love Hank's talk about social media in this, like the way he handles it, the way he approached it, and the way that April May thinks about it, I find so fascinating. I did listen to this on audiobook right before I went and saw Hank and John, like the day before, and I finished the thing in a day. So I've never finished an audiobook in a day that was this long, but I absolutely loved it. This is gonna be one of my favorite books of the year, hands down. It is sci-fi-ish, but a very contemporary sci-fi. I think it's actually classified as speculative fiction. It's about these statues that come to Earth all in one night. None of the security cameras can pick it up. They appear in every city in the world overnight, and April happens to be one of the first people that takes a goofy little YouTube video with one, and it goes viral. That's the basic premise, but there's so much more to it than that. Next up, I read Sadie by Courtney Summers. I liked the idea of this book. I gave it a 3.5 stars, and I really liked the idea of a book that's like mixed in with a podcast, even though I don't really listen to podcasts, but if you do listen to them, I think you would really enjoy this. I did listen to it on audiobook because I wanted that podcast feel to it. And I will say, as an audiobook, I would give this 4.5 stars. It's an excellent audiobook. There were great voice actors. It's a full cast. But as a book and the subject matter, it's very contemporary, which is not my thing, which is why I gave it a 3.5 stars. And some of the scenes were not my favorite. But I will say, go into this with like trigger warnings. It's very graphic in parts, which I was not expecting, so beware of that. I'm glad I read it. I didn't hate it, but it also is not my favorite thing, and it's not something I'm gonna buy. Next up was kind of a little bit of a disappointment for me and really surprised me, actually, and that is Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. I expected to give this 5 stars because I love Strange the Dreamer, and I really love the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series as well. But something about this book just did not click with me. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's more like a 3.75. I just really didn't like Nova as a character. I didn't like I liked the idea of the sisters and how they were slowly added into the group. But I didn't like the way that Nova and Cora like overshadowed the characters that I actually cared about, being like Laszlo and Sarai and Minya and the rest of the Godspawns, so I didn't love that. This also took a really jarring sci-fi twist, which I was not expecting at all. Though I did like the hints at the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which if you read that, you probably picked up on it in this. But yeah, this was not my favorite thing whatsoever. But I did enjoy it. I don't even know what I wish had happened. Like, I didn't have a plan for what I wanted in this book. I just know that this was not it. This was a 3.75, 4 stars. Not my favorite sequel. Next up, I read Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I listened to this on audio on Scribd, and I think this might be one of my favorite Stephen King books to date. I gave it a 4.5 stars, which I think is what I gave it, but I actually found this like a lot creepier at times than it. I think it's just because I was not as familiar with the story. Like, I'm familiar with the It movie, like the old one. But parts of this with like, if you haven't read this and don't want to know anything about it, sorry. But the parts of this with the zombie cat, I have a cat. This freaked me out. Like, I think I had actual nightmares about this, and I've never had nightmares about a book in my life. Like, I could not listen to this at nighttime or when it was dark. I couldn't do it. It freaked me out too much. Like, who am I? This also took a really depressing turn that I wasn't expecting. Like, I've seen this movie, but I was very, very young when I watched it. So I literally don't remember anything except, like, the idea of the pet cemetery. Like, you bury something there and it comes back to life. That's all I remembered about it. And this is a movie that my sister was really afraid of as a kid. And now I know why, because it really freaked me out. And I don't even know if I want to watch the movie. But I think they're doing a remake, so I might. But I'm really afraid. This was very, very good, though. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and probably my favorite Stephen King to date, because there is bits of it that I don't like, and there was nothing in this that I really didn't like, except maybe Stephen King's main male characters really grind my gears. Like, they get on my nerves a lot. They're just so overly sexualized, and I hate it. But other than that, this was great. And next up, I was actually part of Elliot Brooks's beta reading round 2, so I read Peace and Turmoil, which I really, really enjoyed. I read it as an ebook. She gave me a copy, an e-copy to be a beta reader, which I don't even think I've mentioned on here yet because it all happened within the span of like a month, and I have been pre-filming videos. But I really enjoyed this. I love her cover. I love the monster art that's in this. I actually bought a bookmark from Jay's store. Let me go get that. So I bought a Peace and Turmoil bookmark. This is really cute. I'll link Jay's store down below where you can purchase these. She's going to be making candles to go along with characters and places from her book. I'm just so excited about this release, to be honest. I love Elliot. She's one of my favorite booktubers. So I was really excited to be a part of her beta reading process. And I gave her book 4.25 stars. I think this is a great start to the series. I really, really like the characters in this. I think her name is Zodia. Don't hold me to that. But she's the character that is from a place off the main island of our main characters in this. And her power, and just her character is very faith-based, which I really, really liked reading. And her powers were super interesting. Like, this is a multi-perspective story, but Zodia was definitely my favorite character in this. But I loved all of our characters, really. Like, I loved Elizabeth. I loved the dragon tamer was really cool. There are dragons in this. This is just a really solid first book in a fantasy series, trilogy. I don't actually know what it's gonna be. And her book is not available yet. It is still in like the editing process, and I think arcs are going out soon. But she's starting to post more videos about her book and making videos that were already made public, that were part of people from the newsletter, which is how I got this arc. And I just, as you can see, I'm very, very excited about this. Like, I'm so proud of her, and I'm so excited that I actually liked her book. And it's very, very well written. Like, there are a ton of politics in here, but I also really enjoyed her talk about like main world, real world topics and the way she incorporated them into this fantasy novel, which is something I always like in books, but it was really cool to see it added into a fantasy book that was really well written and had really cool monster art and a really cool cover and merch that is slowly becoming available. As you can tell, I love this. I'm gonna stop talking about it now. And then Lynn's book came out, which is Good Morning, Good Night Tweets, Little Pep Talks for Me and You. This is a compilation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's tweets because he writes them as basically little poems, and he's done this for years on his Twitter. And somebody thought to compile them into a book with little illustrations from Johnny's son, who is a friend of his on Twitter. If you follow Lynn on Twitter, you've probably seen him around. And I believe Johnny has his own book, the Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too, which I will probably eventually pick up, but it's really expensive for like it being a graphic novel. But anyways, this was great. I listened to the audiobook because Lynn reads it himself, and I listened to it in like 2 hours because it's really short. Not even 2 hours. I think it's actually like 40 minutes, and I listened to it on like either 1.5 or 2 times speed because that's how I listen to audiobooks. But yes, 5 out of 5 stars. This book is beautiful. Next up, I read Devil in the White City. I also listened to this on audiobook, and I didn't really like it. I think I gave it 3 stars. It's more like a 2.5. I found the beginning so boring. Like, I almost DNF'd it. It was so boring. And like, I liked... A boarding pass just fell out of my book. You can tell I didn't read this physically. Somebody was using their boarding pass from Seattle to Alaska as their bookmark for this book. Anyways, I found H.H. Holmes interesting. I do find serial killers interesting, but they're also really freaky and kind of scare me a little bit. But this wasn't scary whatsoever to me. And I read it during Spookathon, so I kind of wanted it to be a little bit creepy, but it really wasn't. I guess the only thing creepy about this was the fact of how easy it was to kill people and get away with it during the Chicago Fair. But I didn't really like this. I'm gonna unhaul it. Just kidding, I forgot to talk about one that I read before Devil in the White City. And that is Confessions by Kanae Minato. This was way more messed up than I expected it to be. This is Japanese thriller, horror, I don't really know what to classify it as. And it's about this woman who is talking to her classroom. She's a teacher, and she decides to take revenge on one of the students because she thinks one of those students killed her daughter. And it was classified as an accident, so the police didn't take any action with it, but she knows it wasn't an accident. And so it's her last day of teaching, and she just starts talking to this class, and it just slowly goes downhill from there. And there's multiple perspectives in this, and it's a full cast narration, which I was not expecting at all until the perspective changed, and I was like, oh. I gave this 3.75 stars. It's really messed up. It's very like quiet Japanese horror. I know Kate's really into the Asian horror genre because she's not a horror person, but it's like Battle Royale, kind of like where they'll mention a sentence that's really messed up, but they don't make a big deal out of it, and you're just, as a reader, like, what? What did you just say? It's that type of horror, so it's not like jump scary whatsoever. But I thought this was really fun. If you're looking for some Japanese horror, this is a good one. Then I listened to the audio of Phantom of the Opera. It's very different. Well, not very, but it's like pretty different from the show in the terms of the order of how things happen. Raoul and Christine felt a little bit different to me, mostly Christine. Raoul's pretty much the same. I don't really like him. The Phantom is much more whiny in this, I will say that. Definitely not the tall, dark, mysterious, beautiful voiced man from the movie. which I'm very familiar with. Just the musical in general. I've actually seen this on Broadway. But I gave this a 3.75 stars. I think it was fun for what it is, to see the source material that the show came from, and you can definitely see where Andrew Lloyd Webber got his ideas, because they're all present in here. They're just like tweaked a little bit, and some of them are over sensualized in the show and that type of thing. Next up we have The Walking Dead Volume 3, Safety Behind Bars. This is when they're in the prison, if you're familiar with the TV show. I gave this 3 stars. It's not my favorite thing. This takes place while they're in the prison. Lori's really annoying in this, but she's also really annoying during this point in the show. But I also prefer the way the show handled this portion of the story, so 3 stars. And then last is Utsubora by Sumiko Nakamura. Ooh, sorry if I butchered that. And Kate recommended this for people who like Murakami, so I was like, sure. But what I've learned about myself is I don't like graphic novels with mature content, because I can like skip over it with my eyes in like a book if it's text, but when it's pictures, it's grosser. I didn't like this. I gave it 2 stars. I didn't think the story was good enough to make up for the images that I did not want to see. So I will be unhauling this. Sorry, Kate. I know you really liked it, but I can't. So these are all the books that I've read recently. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.